All right, welcome everyone to another episode of GoLive. This is your host Rishabh, founder and CBO at GoML, where we focus and we help customers leveraging large language models to solve their actual business problems. While we have had very interesting guests on the show in the past, today I've been joined with very interesting guest, Pratima from our AWS team. She leads the complete partners and the strategy group for the healthcare team at AWS. Pratima, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, we're going to have a lot of conversation, a lot of fun in the next 30 minutes. Why don't you probably introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you, Rishabh, for the opportunity. My name is Pratima Srinivas. I've been with AWS close to 6 years, hitting year six in November. I support all the SI consulting partners for healthcare business globally. Everything we do at AWS is through partners. And I'm very excited to talk today about the generative AI. I'm covering all sorts of healthcare workloads, whether it's EHR on AWS to data lake to analytics. But today, conversations will be around the generative AI. My background is I'm a physician. I've been in healthcare for 25 years and I've worked with other tech companies. So looking forward to this session today. Thank you.
Thanks, Pratima, again for joining us. While the focus today obviously is going to be how do we leverage or how healthcare providers primarily can leverage and can build GenAI. But as the series focuses on how do we move beyond the hype. So today we're going to focus on how providers can move beyond the POC and what are the use cases, what are the challenges that they can overcome to move these workloads to build at scale in production. What can we expect in today's webinar? Well, obviously, we'll probably dive a little deeper into the GoML and AWS partnership, specifically on the healthcare and the GenAI side. But most importantly, we'll probably dive deeper jointly with Pratima in terms of what are the challenges that providers today are facing when it comes to GenAI adoption and how they can overcome those challenges. What are the top use cases that probably the industry is seeing within this area that is going live and seeing the light of the day? What is driving these use cases? Most importantly, what is the support that AWS brings in along with their partners to help providers go live faster? We'll also probably dive deeper in terms of what or how, from our practical expertise in this area, what are the areas that providers generally go wrong with and how they can avoid these pitfalls to go live faster, build applications at scale. And obviously, towards the end of the session, we also have a very interesting offer for all our viewers over here, where you can engage with GoML and AWS to kickstart your journey by building a free POC or a funded pilot with us today. With that, very brief introduction about GoML. While a lot of our repeat POs already know what GoML does, but GoML, unlike probably the hype that's created in the market, where everyone is focused on building on GenAI, we focus heavily on how do we build adoption at scale with GenAI. Leveraging our very focused boilerplates module through our GoML AI-Matic framework, we focus with customers only on three things. How do we help customers build these applications at scale, move beyond POCs? How do we help them do this at 95% and plus accuracy? And how do we help them do this securely, managing their data in their environments? And how do we ensure that their users are trained and adaptability is built? Leveraging that, we have been able to go live with almost close to 80 plus use cases within the GenAI space across healthcare and financial services in the last 2 years. A very strategic partner with AWS, we're a launch competency partner with GenAI as well as an ML competency partner. We are also a strategic collaboration agreement partner with AWS. Most importantly, we are 2 years old as an organization. We ourselves as a startup love working with other startups and enterprise customers. Born in GenAI can boast of being, understanding these large language models. Unlike other organizations, we are not also doing GenAI. We only leverage these 6 boilerplates to help customers leverage and build use cases on large language models. Happy to probably dive deeper into GoML with folks interested. Coming to the gist of the conversation today, right? And again, as we started this session with, right, the focus with this series again is how do we help customers move beyond the hype? And obviously today's session is more focused towards healthcare providers, right? But if you really look at it from the perspective of providers, right, it's a very unique space to be in, right? And while we'll dive deeper in why probably this is a unique place, and most importantly, what type of use cases are being solved, we wanted to probably give a very brief understanding where the overall healthcare market is from the GenAI adoption perspective, right? And these are some numbers that HIMSS report also, or even Accenture's healthcare report actually states, right? Healthcare today, right, while it has been considered to be a laggard in a lot of tech adoptions, be it cloud, be it the World Wide Web, but for GenAI specifically has been rated as a leading industry, which is probably experimenting, is probably leveraging a lot of these models. You've got Open Biolama, you've got, a lot of these fine-tuned models that are being leveraged by providers. But HIMSS data states that only 15 to 20% of these pilots reach into production in the healthcare space, right? While this is still at par with the industry average, but that's not the right number, right? And if I probably go to other surveys that have been conducted, like the Accenture Healthcare Report, it's 70% providers globally, right, have started pilots in 2024, but only 15 to 20% of these have seen light of the day, right? And that's why it's stated that healthcare leads in experimentation but lags in operationalization. Now, what is the reason for that? While we'll dive deeper into what are the pitfalls that providers are getting into, but primarily, if we really look at it, three major reasons are regulatory frameworks that are probably slowing down these adoptions at scale, the data availability, which is very siloed with healthcare providers, and providers are still looking at adopting this as standalone pilots and not integrating these into workflows, right? Another point to probably note when we look into this industry's GenAI adoption is that innovation that has always been at par obviously needs to be aligned with compliance, care quality, clinical trust, right? And when I probably say that, and that's where probably I started my pitch with, healthcare is a very, very unique environment for us to look at any kind of tech adoption, especially GenAI adoption, right? Because we need to focus on four areas. Data sensitivity, which is across industries, but within healthcare, it's pretty sensitive, even with masked data. We today work with providers who cannot share even masked PHI data, right, with these with these models, right, closed source models. So we need to look at different unique or different innovative ways how we can probably build synthetic data on top of this data that doesn't go to these models, right? Fragmented systems, as all of us know, healthcare providers or providers today sit on very siloed systems, be it customized EHR systems, or be it third-party imaging systems, right? Or be it simple patient documents or doctors' notes that they actually sit on. So these systems are very fragmented. And how do we probably build or reduce that silos across these systems, right? Clinical validation. While every industry loves accuracy, right? Be it fintech, be it retail. But when I probably build insights into a retail use case for an e-com customer today, right? The customer, they don't come and ask me why, this particular insight, or why customers are buying furniture, right? If their sales are increasing, they're okay with that. But when it comes to healthcare, it's not only about the accuracy, it's not only about the outcomes. You need to have your outcomes transparent, explainable, right? So a clinician will never, or a physician will never start using this solution or any kind of a solution today till the time they're not confident why that particular output has come in, or there's a traceability for that outcome. And most importantly, and this is a saying that goes through, right? A 95% accurate system is not usable by a doctor, because a doctor by default is 95% accurate, right? So we need to look at cultural caution across this industry where these systems need to be 99.9% accurate. And we have this provider that we work in New York, where we probably, they had the system that they had built, and they had in testing phase for 8 months, but they could not go live because it's stuck at 95% accuracy, right? So these are some complexities that we are trying to probably solve with providers. But one thing that probably really comes out from a lot of expertise of working with almost close to 15 plus providers across is that success is in building workflows, right? Not just looking at models. What does that mean is that we need to identify, providers need to identify different systems in the system. So you've got your EHR systems, right? You've got your CRM system, you've got your patient record systems, right? You've got your health record systems and so on, right? How do you integrate these into a workflow-based automation rather than bringing a model which just does, let's say, a clinical data generation automation, right? So we need to probably look at a complete workflow when it comes to automation. We'll probably dive deeper into some of these use cases, right? And most importantly, what we've seen as a trend is that, while the second half of this year, and probably our anticipation is next year as well, is going to be transition from pilots to production ready use cases. And that requires, or that the three major transformations that are happening within the healthcare industry to make sure this transition happens beyond POCs is, number one is integrating, as we discussed, across operational workflows, right? Not just probably look at these systems and these models in silos. Most importantly, embedded co-pilots. Now, what does that mean is that a lot of these systems that were actually going live were focusing on probably an independent operational system, let's say patient discharge summary generation, right? But how do you now probably integrate these co-pilots with actual hospital systems? within your EHR, within your CRM and other systems is where the success is going to come in. And most importantly, build an ecosystem of these solutions, right? So while we talk about operational, advancement, that cannot just happen probably at, the patient admin level. That cannot just happen at a clinical level. How do you probably integrate these clinical co-pilots that extract insights from the clinical data or medical data to then probably embed into patient follow-up systems, right? So what level of information needs to be sent to the patient after post-discharge? So that's where these ecosystems needs to be driven together, which we'll again probably try to highlight through the use case industry. Now, what does that mean for the providers, right? Is a 3-point summary, right? Where they're seeing, or they should see success. Start with high friction, high frequency workloads. Let's not look at very, very low hanging fruits that will not have any kind of impact on the system, right? And probably some of the things that you can actually probably, or what we've seen with customers or with healthcare providers working, right, is let's look at something like a patient discharge summarization, which is a very, very high frequency act, right, which probably happens day in day out into a hospital chain, right? Leverage trusted GenAI partners. I'm not saying you come and work with GoML, you should, but you should look at a partner who has done this type of a transformation. I'll give you a very simple example over here. A lot of times providers look at this as a technology transformation, but this is much beyond a technology. It's not a tech problem that you need to solve. So we work with providers where there are challenges that they face where they cannot share the actual data, even it's masked to this with this closed source models. So we've already built systems. One of our boilerplates actually generates a very, very high accuracy synthetic data that is sent to these models. The actual data never goes, right? So that's the experience that will help you go live much faster rather than just experimenting in-house, right? Let's look at measurable ROI, not medical performance. And when I probably say that, a lot of times we work with providers and they come, I want to automate my patient discharge process. But that's not the outcome that you're looking for. That's the system that you're automating. Your outcome should be aligned with that by the end of this pilot, I need to save 20 hours of my admin system when they're actually looking at patient discharge summary generation, right? So let's look at very, very measurable ROI that will help you move faster. And most importantly, and this is something that providers should definitely look at, don't look at governance and compliance as an afterthought. It cannot be a bolt, right, in your overall system. It is actually the wheel that's going to run your car. So start thinking of it from day one itself when you start. And the best way, or the most, or the fastest way is to leverage ecosystem that AWS provides, which is HIPAA eligible, which obviously Pratima is going to dive deeper into the coming slides. So 4 things that we need to keep in mind. What are the I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but what are the challenges that we've seen generally with providers that are solvable, or that actually also provides an opportunity for something like a GenAI to solve, right? So starting right from something like a clinical documentation, right, which is kind of a bread and butter for any kind of a hospital chain today, right? And actually, Gartner reports that 82% of physicians' time is spent on entering notes, right, and updating EHR systems. But that's not their primary job, right? Their primary job is to come and treat patients, right? But that leads to burnout, right? And that's why if you look at it today within the US healthcare system, a doctor in an 8-hour workday can only look at 4 patients, right? The average wait time for a patient to come into the system and wait for a specialist is around 90 days, right? So how do we solve this? This is a very good opportunity as well, right? So how do we probably leverage these systems? So start generating a lot of these nodes, right, from siloed nodes that a physician generates into a complete generated ecosystem, right? And these models are much more capable of doing that, right? Let's look at patient and medical data, right? And what do we mean by that, right? The biggest challenge that these healthcare providers today face is that they are a very siloed system and they have multimodal data. They're not just looking at structured or unstructured data. They're also looking at imaging data. They're also looking at handwritten data. And anyone who understands doctors' handwriting, kudos, they should be given a Nobel Prize, right? So they have voice data, right? The challenge that today happens is that there's a lot of siloed data that cannot be fragmented by regular technologies, and there's very limited decision making that happens, right? We're working with this New York-based healthcare provider called Atria. The biggest or the most important problem that they solved was how do we accumulate all this data, put that into the models, give the models the right context to automate their patient healthcare assessment systems. They were able to save 20 hours of their physicians on a weekly basis, sorry, because the system now understood that multimodal data and generated a very, very relevant summary for them, right? Care coordination, coming from personal, my dad was in the ICU last week, right? And the doctor asked me to coordinate with the nephrologist, the pulmonologist, right, which is a nightmare for me. I'm good at mathematics. I'm not a good doctor. I cannot be good at it. But that not only obviously was a frustration for me, but it delayed the overall caregiving process itself, right? So how can we leverage, the data from different departments that's actually coming in to build co-pilots, right? Leveraging these models that can actually then probably start spewing out complete data, which takes all the information, not probably siloed information across different departments, right? Patient communication, right? Which is probably, again, this is where hospital chains probably again falter a lot, right? And these are again some numbers coming from HIMSS that 82% of the patient follow-ups post-discharge, right, are either missed or the scheduling appointments are probably take a lot of time, right? Which is a big problem to solve, right? So we are working with this organization called MedKit, which is a platform that does scheduling automation, right? They've leveraged this as an opportunity to probably now leverage the discharge or once the patient has moved out, the overall historical data to now probably do automated follow-ups, right? Timely automated follow-ups with the patient, right? On medication, on scheduling of appointments, right? On doctor visits, on planning of doctor's calendar, right? So some of these challenges also present a very good opportunity, right? With that, I'm going to hand over to Pratima, right, to probably dive deeper in terms of what are the use cases that she's seeing on the industry side and most importantly on the AWS side.
Thank you, Rishabh. I hope you can hear me. Perfect. Next slide, please. So for us at AWS, generative AI isn't new. We've been doing this for many years, whether it's think of it like Alexa, Amazon.com search. What's right now different is the scalability and the accessibility, right? The foundation models, these are trained on billions of parameters, and they can be adopted as quickly as a real world task. Like you were talking about summarization, discharge summary, whether it's image creation for radiologists. We have so many different tools, either using Bedrock or integrating with different models. So we can make it easy for whether it's an enterprise customer or developers are looking to apply AI without needing a lot of their deep AI ML expertise. The real value that AWS provides to our customers is to move fast. We want to help reduce cost, especially for healthcare customers. They're constantly looking at ways to optimize. And we want to innovate across many business use cases. As you can see on the slide, these are some of the top generative AI use cases that we have seen, which is powered by AWS. Generative AI can support clinicians' workflow. Imagine, it can listen to patient conversation, help summarize clinical notes, consolidate records from various sources of EHR. It can also suggest optimal imaging and diagnosis based on the patient data, right? Especially if a patient has secondary conditions, being able to provide those ICD codes. Then the other one is around the care management. Systems can efficiently review the records of registries, whether analyzing the individual records. We can help identify the risk, study the cohorts in the EHR to reveal the population risk, and also being able to segment those groups for the targeted interventions. I mean, like you mentioned, Rishabh, most physicians, we don't have the time to look into the entire individual record. So anything that can help augment through generative AI is what we are seeing. Next comes the patient engagement. Most of us who've been supporting hospitals and health systems, we know that patient sits at the center today. And generative AI can provide self-triage capabilities, right? Proactively being able to communicate with patients, whether it's a discharge summary notes, being able to offer some of the post-discharge care guidance, especially when patients come to the hospitals, they're very under the emotional distress. They may not even be able to understand all the post-op discharge summary notes that goes along. Being able to generate like the patient-friendly reports, so that they can go back and take a look at it. And finally, the other thing that generative AI can boost is around the research, whether it's automating the data cleaning, enabling the cross-patient queries to identify those clinical trials. That's something we are seeing a huge around the research side. And finally is around the enterprise functions, right? Like chatbot, they can serve a lot of the educational needs for, it could be medical students, the way medicine is taught today is completely different what I studied like almost 30 years ago, being able to help search the documents, and whether it's to a HR, it could be around the administrative use cases, internal questions, these are some of the top use cases that we are seeing. Next slide, please. So AWS customers, they've constantly asked us how quickly can they take advantage of what is out there today and what is likely to be coming tomorrow, right? To quickly begin use all the different foundational models. Generative AI is within their different businesses and the organization so that they can help better productivity. They can transform these offerings. And what we have seen is we have identified 4 important considerations to quickly build. And as you can see, Amazon Bedrock, it's one of our fully managed service that can make a range of powerful foundational models from Amazon. And we also work with different AI companies, whether it's Anthropic, Cohere, Meta, Stability AI, We want to provide that scalable, reliable, and the secure API for our customers. And I would say our secret powers or the superpowers is security. It's pretty much like our backbone for our healthcare business. And with the Bedrock serverless experience, what our customers can see is being able to quickly experiment with all the different foundational models, being able to privately customize these foundational models with their own data, and then being able to easily integrate and deploy them into applications that by using all our tools and capabilities without being able to manage that infrastructure. That is exactly what we are trying to help our customers. And as you can see, privacy and security is one of the biggest challenges in healthcare today. We know there are so many different business continuity solutions, and we want to provide that foundation. And next slide, please. So before we talk into what generative AI can do in healthcare, right, it's important for all of us to understand, like from the ground, what are some of the challenges that comes up during deploying these technologies, responsibly. I know, Rishabh, you kind of talked a little bit around the governance. And the way we have structured some of these challenges are around 3 different buckets. First one, let's start with the technical side. This is where many of the practical hurdles begin, whether there could be a skewed data, it could lead into unfair, even harmful outputs, especially this is a healthcare organization, right? If the model is trained mostly on certain population of care settings and the results may not generalize well, for example, a model which is performing well on the urban hospital data may not work well with the rural clinics because it's completely skewed data. Again, around the complex models, they're often like a black box. Clinicians and regulators need explainability. Many generative models make it very hard to trace how the answers are produced. Some of the computational resources are also around the concern. Smaller health organization and community hospitals may not have that infrastructure to fine tune, but in short, technology is very powerful, but without that reliable data, transparency and infrastructure, it can create a lot of friction to provide that value. So definitely this is one of the things that we help our customers through our technical capabilities. Let's now move to the ethical considerations, right? Like now, even when the technology works, ethics come to the forefront, especially in healthcare. Privacy risks are huge, very significant. Accuracy and oversight are very critical. We don't want these generative models to hallucinate or generate like some plausible incorrect clinical suggestions. And then finally, it's around the bias amplification, right? We don't want that to worsen any health disparities. This is why I think having that ethical guardrails from consent to privacy to fairness, and that needs to be baked in like from day one. And I loved how, Rishabh, you kind of touched upon it. Like, we want to make sure that these are some of the things that we consider as a foundational aspect of the generative AI. And finally, let's talk about the organizational barriers, Even the best model sometimes can not be the right organizational foundation, whether because if it's not aligned with the organizational goals, if the AI tools are not tied into measurable clinical or operational outcomes. You talked about the ROI, which is the most important aspect, right? Why should our customers be deploying? What are some of the benefits that the organization is going to see by having these AI models or using the generative AI in healthcare business? Governance, without a defined framework for model validation or deployment, that can also be a huge challenge. And finally, education and adoption. Many healthcare staff, and I've been working with hospitals and health systems for decades now, they still are not very confident about using AI tools. I know it's the new shiny object in the world today, but we are trying to get on it. Most hospital systems are trying to understand. So investing in training and digital literacy is another key aspect for achieving those adoption and trust. And I have a slide which talks about different programs that we offset, how from AWS we help our hospitals and health system staff to get enabled. And basically the takeaway for success here is generative AI is as much as a change management. I seriously think as much as it's to the model performance. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we have developed at AWS. A lot of us who are supporting hospital systems, we know that health systems produce like petabytes of these unstructured data every day, and that's growing exponentially. So the mass of information that comprises, whether it's clinical documents, right, whether it's the PDF on lab reports, radiology, pathology, image reports, clinical procedure notes, SOAP notes and it could be the insurance claims coming through. All this data is not so easy to use and also to analyze at the moment. So every healthcare provider, whether it could be a provider, payer, life sciences company, what they are trying to solve is how to bring in that problem of the structured data so they can operate more efficiently. What hospitals want to do is to improve the patient outcomes and also most of the life sciences and the payer side of the business. And end of the day, they want to accelerate the decision making, right? So as you can see on the right side, we have a couple of our offerings around Amazon Textract. What Textract does is it can automatically extract the printed text from insurance claim forms or handwritten medical notes and documents. The next one is the Comprehend Medical. We have a NLP service where you can map each extracted piece of information to the associated medical codes with high accuracy and low latency. This is kind of, again, bringing down the administrative burden for most of the clinicians, right? And finally, the Health Lake. Health Lake is a analytics service. You can store, you can query, you can analyze all the health data for comprehensive view of the patient's medical history. So basically, there are different use cases that you can see on the left side. We can help accelerate insurance claim processing. We can scale and accelerate pharmacovigilance. We can improve the pop health, especially if you have all the indexed and structured data coming from different various populations. So these are some things that we're saying. And a couple of examples before I move is today, Capital District Physicians Health Plan. They're a nonprofit physician-founded and guided health plan, which is serving 400,000 members in upstate New York. They are working to process all the medical data efficiently to improve the patient care, and they're using Comprehend Medical Textract, And on the insurance company side, they spend millions of dollars to extract that medical information. One of our customers is Anthem. They chose Amazon Textract and Comprehend Medical to extract and digitize that data. They're almost automating 80% of their benefits program and claim processing through all our services. Next slide, please. So this is our next offering, which we call the HealthScribe. I think this is very close to me as a physician. Healthcare software vendors, they create applications. They want to reduce the burden of the clinical documentation. What HealthScribe supports is the responsible use of AI by including the references to the original patient transcripts. It makes it very easy to validate the accuracy of the application summary. And like I already touched upon, security and privacy are kind of backbone. They're built into the AWS HealthScribe, so it can ensure the input audio and output the text so that it's stored in the HealthScribe. And it requires like an existing infrastructure, right? Whether providing that patient physician audio files, especially when you have a patient sitting in the room and there is a caregiver, being able to distinct all of those different people sitting in the room and being able to scribe. I think that's a huge powerful play for us in the generative AI space. The next one, please. Yeah, the top use cases. With all the surveys that we've done around the HealthScribe, we want to help reduce the documentation burden on clinicians. We want to empower them to quickly validate and edit AI-generated clinical notes. We want to help finalize their documentation. We want to actually boost the efficiency of the medical scribes, right? Because this can help reduce the documentation turnaround time and also help them serve more patients, because physicians can have that extra time that has been offset from the documentation side. And finally, you create an experience, right, that will enable patients to quickly recollect some of the key highlights of their conversation with the physician. So definitely this is something we're seeing immensely at AWS. Next slide, please. With this service, HealthScribe, what it really, I think I just want to call out some of the key AWS HealthScribe features here. It integrates into the application. It will significantly enhance and accelerate the clinical documentation. It can provide clinicians the benefit of detailed consultation transcripts, being able to provide the clinicians the ability to skip some of the small tasks, because sometimes it's very easy to miss some of them, and being able to only focus on the key portions of the discussion. That is something AWS HealthScribe can do. We also provide like a preliminary draft of clinical notes using generative AI. And finally, being able to extract that key medical terms. That's huge from the discussion with the patients. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I want to touch upon what are some of the partner programs that, how can we help execute, right, through GoML to our customers. And there are numerous number of partner programs. And one of the advantages to work with GoML is, please tap into some of these partner programs, and they have access to this Gen AI incubator. It's a production incubator. We provide, as you can see, we have innovation centers that we can help, offset some of the production cost. Even if you want to do a POC, we have a global team. We have applied scientists, we have business consultants, ML strategists. Let us help through GoML, help solve some of your ML projects, because sometimes if there is a customization that needs, we can help GoML together as one company. That's one of the things that we do with AWS partners, is everything we do around the scalability is through partners. And let's see if there is an opportunity that we can help you guys. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is another generative AI innovation center that I kind of talked about. We want to see what's the art of the possible. As most of you know, at AWS, we are very customer obsessed. We like to be very innovative. We want to explore and experiment safely in a very reliable environment, and also always thinking about the cost, around the cost efficiency, right? Being as responsible means, we want to make sure that we have certain guardrails so that to reduce the risk, especially it's all around the PHI information. And model selection, let us help you, as a part of the AI Innovation Center. We can help customers. We can help through GoML as a team to also value that acceleration, time to value, and of course, balancing all the efficiency, scalability, risk reduction through different frameworks that we have created. We'd be happy to go to market, co-sell, and let us help you. This is a very new piece of the healthcare realm right now today with generative AI, and we have many customers who are already running Amazon Bedrock, Textract, all the other different services. So let us help you through this partnership with GoML. These are some of the different digital courses. I think, Rishabh, you kind of talked about, how many, like today, the healthcare staff in the hospital systems have this huge deficiency, whether it's cloud, generative AI. So these are some of the different digital courses that we offer to our customers. And let us also find, if there is a partner program that we need to offset some of the cost, let us help you look into that to make sure that our customers get this type of training. I was on a call earlier this morning with another big partner, same thing, this is a day in, day out challenge. We want to educate our customers, around the different courses. Yep.
This one's my favorite. This is all of my, apart from obviously working with our customers, but all of my AWS knowledge comes in. So absolutely, this one's my favorite, Pratima.
And is this you?
I think what we'll do is, Pratima, obviously, first of all, thanks, Pratima, for covering that up, right? And one thing that Pratima did highlight, right, before I probably move into the next part of the session is that the way that providers can actually leverage is the combination of AWS and GoML, right? Obviously, AWS brings in the right aspects and tenets for you to build, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think we spent some time on this, that a big failure point for providers today is that they try to probably build this on bare bone or bare metal instances, and then probably have to look at multiple things from a compliance perspective, right? And that has been listed as the major point where they've not been able to scale these applications specifically by HEMS, right? So that's where AWS comes in, right? Most of the services that we have, including Bedrock, it's like that Pratima highlighted, right? HealthScribe are HIPAA eligible, right? So you don't have to look at different tenets from compliance perspective. You just have to worry about your data and the application that you're bringing in. And that's where, partners like GoML come into picture, because we are a GenAI competency, a machine learning competency partner being audited for a healthcare competency. We bring in the right aspects in terms of how do we build these applications at scale for you. And I spoke about some of these tenets in terms of how do we, build the synthetic data for you to not be compliant from data perspective, right? How do I build these solutions from 99% accurate, right, by building cross-model reflection and so on and so forth. So bring in the right expertise for you to now leverage this AWS ecosystem and have these applications hosted that help you probably go live faster, right? With that, I wanted to probably definitely spend some time on this slide, right? Because again, with the experience, and we've worked with almost close to 15, healthcare providers in the last 2 years across mid-tier and enterprise scale, right? And there are four major patterns that we've seen that generally providers get wrong when it specifically comes to GenAI adoption, right? And I think we've touched upon a couple of these. And the biggest and the most important thing to note over here is that they start with a model adoption. And every time I had a dime for someone, or the CIO actually came to me and they said they want to implement Anthropic, right? I wouldn't have at least close to $100,000, right? But that's not what you want to do. You don't want to implement Anthropic, right? You want to look at your workflows, right? So let's start discussing probably what is the problem statement that you have. So have a use case first methodology, right? If you're only looking, and this is something I always tell to all the CIOs that I talk to, if you're only focused on the model, you'll be able to build flashy demos. Like you'll not be able to build something which actually provides you a measurable ROI. You'll not be able to build a scalable application, right? This is something that everyone knows, but still no one pays attention to, right? Your agents can be as smart as the data foundation. Everyone knows this, right? But day in, day out, when we work with healthcare providers, and that's where and that's where probably the boilerplate module comes in, right? So GoML today doesn't focus on the build, right? If you have your data right, and if you want to, let's say, probably build a copilot, that's what we're doing for the second largest hospital chain in Asia, right? We're building a copilot. If you have the data, day one, our boilerplate will give you 70% accuracy, right? So that what I can do is I can probably further help you build this data, massage this data, so I can take you from 70% to 95% and above accuracy to help you build that, right? So let's focus on data. Let's not focus on building these applications. That's something that the boilerplate can do out of the box, right? And I love the saying, GenAI doesn't live where the clinician works, it's of no use, right? And I have a very real world example noted over here that I want to narrate to our audience over here. So there's a hospital, right, that we're actually working with, and we built a very, very good, or they built a very good solution for their in-house use case, which is focused around AI scribe tool that they had developed, right, which was actually doing transcription, automated transcription of clinical notes from doctors, right? But there was one loophole that they had, right, and because of which the adoption was just 12% in 1 year, right? The transcription that was generated was to be copy pasted by the physician into their Epic EHR, right? So once the transcript is generated, they had to just copy and then paste it to Epic, right? And when we went back to probably clinicians to understand the physicians, right, who were actually using it, to understand why the adoption was only 12%, right? Because it was actually saving hours for them, right? Was they did not want to probably have two siloed systems and copy paste the data out of it, right? So that's why it's very critical for healthcare providers to understand that isolated pilots are gone, right? We need to now look at how do we probably combine each of these outcomes and build an ecosystem of these solutions. So what we did for them, we actually probably automated the whole process of how the data flows over here. And also there were integration issues. So we built a layer of Google Drive integration as well into it, right? And so on and so forth. So very important to reduce that manual switching of tools by physicians, right? So that's the biggest learning that we have. And that's why I love this training. And last but most important is that your compliance cannot be bolted in. It's not like you can build the car and then just probably go and start putting in those compliance bolts. It is not a stepney. It is the wheel of the car, right? That's very critical for us to understand, right? So day one, when we actually sit with our providers, and that's where the boilerplates module is very, very important, is very, very successful, because I'm not focusing on the build. That's already there. Like you're getting 70% accuracy on day one. So what we're going to spend time on with you is how do I ensure compliance, data privacy, and regulation so that we can focus on goLive, right? With that, as Pratima highlighted, we do have access, or probably jointly today GoML and AWS brings in the right aspects. What Pratima did not highlight, which I want to highlight, is we have access to a lot of funding programs as well, right? So being a GenAI competency and an ML competency partner, we have a lot of access to a lot of funding programs. We'd love to probably engage with you if you want to experiment on certain use cases, if you want to probably move beyond the POC phase. So anyone who comes in through this QR code, we'll give a free 4-week POC for you on a use case that has been identified, or a fully funded pilot that we can actually execute jointly with AWS. With that, Pratima, thank you so much for joining us in today. Really appreciate all the insights that you were able to bring in. I hope the audience enjoyed it. And thanks again, Pratima, and everyone for joining in.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, Rishabh and Pratima, can you stay on the stream? I'm going to end the stream, but please don't leave the studio. Okay, I have a quick request.